and we have a special treat for the listeners today. Welcome to the St. Canard Files, a Double O Duck podcast. Yes, I said that correctly. Double O Duck podcast. I'm your host, Will Santana, and
I'm Mike Russo, and life is like a hurricane.
It really is, Mike, man. I'm super excited, but today I got to call you Mike Russo, man.
Yes, because we have a legend with us today.
Yeah, we sure do, man. And I'm really excited. I can't wait till we get into some Double O Duck with him and some Darkwing. But with no further ado, let's go ahead and get into this interview, man.
Yep, we interviewed Mike Peraza. Let's get going.
All right, so Mike Russo, we have a special guest with us today, Mike Peraza. Mike Russo. I have to say his full name, guys, because unfortunately we have two Mikes here, and so we don't have any kind of confusion. All right. But before we start this interview with Mike Peraza, I do have to mention we're going to talk Darkwing and a little bit of Disney Afternoon, and it's kind of an injustice, and in my opinion, it's kind of disrespectful to Mike Peraza because his resume is just amazing, and we are limiting it to just Darkwing and Disney Afternoon here. So with no further ado, we have Mike Peraza here. Welcome, Mike.
Hello, gang.
Welcome, Mike.
Dangerous, Flowey. Jim will kill me for that.
It's nice to talk to you, Mike. It's great to have you on.
It's wonderful to be here, guys.
Yeah, Mike, we've been wanting to get you for quite a while, but schedule conflict, and I've been touring with at these conventions with some of the voice actors and stuff, so it's been kind of fun, and it's been kind of hard to get in sync with you, but I'm glad we finally got you here, man.
Yeah,
well,
awesome.
You gotta get the word out. We need to get more of the artists involved on these things. The voice actors are wonderful and fantastic, but we got to get the people that draw them, because without the artwork and just the voices, you get great radio. So
yeah,
spread the word. Get the artists involved.
I've been trying to track down some artists. Actually, we have a guest coming up who's an artist on the show. I'm trying. I'm doing my best to find some artists.
Yeah, we have two more animators after you, Mike, and then we also have one writer, right, Mike?
Yes, we have one of the writers as well, yeah.
Yeah, so we definitely trying to expand from just the voice actors and trying to get some of the anime. We're trying to get the whole team. It took a whole team. Yeah, it took the whole team to get these episodes out. So
we also interviewed the composer last month too.
Oh yeah, we sure did. Philip Giffen, we sure did. We interviewed him last month.
That is fantastic.
Because I'm a big animation guy. I love the animation and all the Disney stuff. So it's just not always easy for me to track these people down, So I guess we should get started. Let's talk about what your influences were, Mike. What kind of cartoons did you enjoy growing up? Did you always want to go into this field?
Actually, being a baby boomer, when you grew up in the 50s, we had a wealth of fantastic shows on. I know they show like a lot of Mr. Rogers and things, but the people that I knew growing up in the 50s watched a show called Captain Kangaroo, and they had some really limited animation on there called Tom Terrific and Mighty Manfred, things like that. But the thing is, with TV's early days, there wasn't a lot of stuff on as far as they had cartoons from the old shows, from Max Fleischer, the old Popeyes. They had things from Heckle and Jekyll, from they had Mighty Mouse, things like that. And so you could see some really neat animation. But of course, the Disney animation was something about, even as a kid, you knew that something that was really magical and a little bit different, a little more detailed, a little more lifelike came out of Disney. And so we started seeing a show called The Wonderful World of Color, although in my house it was Wonderful World of Black and White, because that's all we had was black and white TV. But we got to see things like from Pinocchio. They would show some real long excerpts from Fantasia, and you went, oh my God, look at this stuff. And it's just something incredible about seeing that something you knew was some kind of artwork, but somehow they were making it move. They were bringing life to it. So I got a kick out of that, and I would sit there and do what a lot of kids do, and just draw in the corners of my school books, little flip books, things like that. Get in a lot of trouble doing that kind of stuff. And of course, you end up doing things for the school newspaper and the yearbook and all that. But I love doing that type of stuff. So my early influences, I'd have to say, was watching cartoons on TV. We had even the Looney Tunes. We could sit there and see all the stuff from Warner Brothers, which is great, and Pre-Censor, all that kind of stuff. We had great Disney cartoons to look at. And like I said, they're all black and white. I didn't see a lot of the color versions unless we went out to a movie theater. And then you see, oh my God, look at the Technicolor up on the big screen. So that, and also, I mean, a lot of my influences were some of the traditional painters at the time. I didn't really make a real big study of it, but I know that I was influenced by Norman Rockwell, Howard Pyle, people like N.C. Wyeth, the traditional illustrators. And because what they did was not just do a painting, but they told stories with their illustrations. I lost them.
No, we're here. No, I'm just really engrossed by everything you're saying here, Mike. It's really awesome to hear this stuff.
Well, my wife usually gets grossed by it, but anyway.
So how did you get started with Disney? Like, what happened there? How did that get started?
Well, I was a big fan of the Disney, like everybody else, I think, at the time, a lot of the kids. And I was in an art class. I was in they call it the sixth period, like it was a sports period. And I was doing baseball, and then I took a real bad hop. I was playing shortstop and crunched up my fingers trying to I caught the ball barehanded, trying to make a real quick throw, and it wasn't a good idea. I thought, you know what, maybe I should do something a little safer. And so anyway, I went ahead, transferred to art class, and I'd enjoyed doing a lot of artwork over the years. And the teacher there said, well, there's a school out there in California that Walt Disney has started. Maybe you should look into it. So he's the one that set up a lot of things for me. And I ended up going out to CalArts. It was a brand new campus. It had only been open for just a little over 2 years when I went out to Valencia. It opened in 71. I went out there in 73. And I got accepted, although I was trying to get into the animation program. There was only what they called experimental animation, which took in finger paints, pinhead nails, sand, all kind of stop motion. Nothing really Disney. In fact, the school at that time wasn't really pro-Disney. Disney had earmarked it quite a bit. Almost half his will was earmarked for CalArts. But they weren't really getting much of a return on their money because, let's say, for instance, I was in a film history class. I talked to the history teacher, and I had just for the first time finally seen Pinocchio in full color. They had it at the library. You could check out every Disney film they'd ever done and watch it on a flatbed. And so I was watching Pinocchio, and I saw Bambi, and I went, oh my God, these films are just breathtaking. And I was in the art school. And I said, well, are we going to be studying any of the Disney films? I remember the teacher, the instructor there, along with our class, about maybe 12 people, broke up in laughter. And the teacher said, quote unquote, we don't consider Disney films worth studying.
Ooh.
But what happened was, the dean at that time, when I was in the art class, I was doing a life drawing. I remember I was sitting there trying to do, I had a book on Norman Rockwell, and I was trying to do these, pretty realistic studies. I was doing quick studies, and I was doing charcoal studies of the figure. And the teacher came around, some of the students started to come around and started watching, because mine were fairly photographically real. I mean, I put a lot of work into it. And I'd been drawing like that since maybe about third grade or so, just really trying to study, light and dark and how it works on a human figure, faces, hands, that kind of stuff. And so he said, boy, what are you looking to do? And I said, well, I want to be an illustrator, maybe work for Disney one day. So he contacted Bill Lunn, who was the acting president of CalArts. Now, Bill Lunn was married at that time to Sharon, who's one of Walt's daughters. And so they set up all these meetings. So I would get a chance to go over to Walt Disney Studios in 1973. And that's where I met a lot of the, what was left of the 9 old men that were still working there. And they would sit there and they would ask me, well, what's going on at CalArts? What do you think of the school? Are you learning anything? And I would tell them just what I was doing. Most of what I was learning was going into the library and checking out either books or looking at the films. And the more I told them, I think that the more upset a few of them became, like, my gosh. And so they worked on a brand new development program. I was offered a job at the studio at that point. But there's a development program going on, and at the same time, they wanted to start a program called Character Animation over at CalArts. It didn't start for a few years later, but it was going to be something where they could sit there and train the artists in very regimented, well thought out classes. We had basic drawing and perspective. We had life drawing. We had design classes. These were classes where if you showed up late, they could just lock the door. I mean, it was a lot of the school at that time was very avant-garde and kind of lackadaisical. But some of the classes, let's say in music and some of the dancing and different things, were very, very regimented, very serious. And when Disney started their program there, it was like that. It was a lot of fun. I don't make it sound like we didn't have a good time, because we really did. But our teachers were all ex-Disney, or they were Disney legends. There was guys that worked with Walt, and they worked on features from Snow White to Pinocchio to Fantasia, Bambi, you name it, all the way up to like Lady and the Tramp and things.
Wow.
And we had people lecturing from all over the place. It was an amazing time to be at CalArts.
Wow, that's some great information there, Mike. I love hearing all of that. But let's jump in.
I'm learning a lot here, man. This is so interesting.
But let's jump ahead just a little bit. I know you were there, Mike, when Disney television animation got started in the mid '80s, correct?
Right.
Could you tell us
Well,
a
there's
little
a
bit
fellow
about?
named Ken Anderson was one of the 9 old men. Or no, he's one of they call him the 10th old man. He should have been one of the 9 old men. The nine
Right.
old men were just they're all animators, very talented people, but there were a tremendous amount of other people at Disney that were also every bit as talented and as good as those as what they singled out for the 9 people. And
Hmm.
Ken Anderson was one of those people. And I'd worked with him on a couple of projects. I worked with him on Catfish Ben. And so when they started doing the TV division, they asked if he could recommend a few people that might come over and help him out with some of the concept art. And he recommended me, which was a heck of an honor. And so I went over and joined him. I would do some work on it was like gummy bears, which it threw me at first. I was still working at Features full time, and the thought of doing a show based on candy, a bag of candy, was a huge idea. And it's like, well, we're going to make this one kind of yellow and make this one red, and make it's like, are we going to put sugar crystals on these guys? And so I went ahead and I did some what's called publicity art. I did sketches of what the characters could look like, even though we weren't really set for sure. And the weird thing is, the sketches I did really early on became used. They're still, in fact, they're using them now on things like the DVD cases and all, decades later. And it's like, oh my gosh. So any artists out there, be careful what you draw, because when you turn it in, it might end up being used over and over and over again, and you can't change those lines later on. You're stuck with it.
Oh, I
But it
had
was,
no
I mean,
idea that was
like
you.
Tom Enriquez is also
Mhm.
one of the. I want to make sure he gets credit too. He was one of the early artists out there
Who?
working on the film around that series.
Who's that?
Tom Enriquez,
Oh, okay.
very very talented guy. So I worked on that with Ken. I worked on the thing Gummy Glen, some of the different early things of the tree and what it would look like, and just character relationships, size relationships, that kind of stuff, what the characters, how they would work, and what colors we were going to use for each character.
So, what about Ducktales then? Tell us a bit about the development of Ducktales.
Ducktales was interesting because I had worked with, where I didn't work with, I knew Carl Barks through the head of the Disney program over at CalArts was Jack Hanna.
Mm-hmm.
So with Carl, the first time I ever met him, and I admit ignorance, I wasn't. I was a big comic fan, but the comics I grew up with were some Disney, but a lot of Superman and Jimmy Olsen and Batman and Spider-Man and more of the superhero types. I know somebody go, oh, I used to blasphemy. How could you not like all that? I liked them. I was just a big superhero fan. But I went ahead. Jack Hanna and Carl had worked together back on in special effects back in the 30s on things like the Old Mill and stuff. And they worked through story, worked on the Donald shorts under Jack King and all. Then later
Right.
on, of course, Carl broke away and went to do his comics and became quite an icon just doing that and creating the whole world of that we based DuckTales on, the entire world of Duckburg with Uncle Scrooge. So anyway, but before that happened, I met Carl, and I was taking him on a tour through CalArts, and he was a little bit hard of hearing, had a little hearing aid in there, so every once you get feedback on it, but it was a real gentleman, real fun guy. So I took him through, and I wish I had known at that point someday I'd be working on a show called DuckTales, and this is the guy you need to thank. But I ended up, we had dinner over at Jack's house a couple of years later when I was working on DuckTales, and I showed Carl some of the work I had done, and the weird thing is, when we started doing DuckTales, the studio bought me all these books. I'm not sure it was called Gladstone or something. It was a company that put these huge hardbound books together, like in volumes of like maybe 3 or so.
Yeah, I think it was Gladstone.
Gladstone, okay.
Yeah.
And so they gave me all these sets of Uncle Scrooge and Donald Duck and different things, which was fantastic. And I went through it. And so some of the things I was doing, I said, well, we're going to make some changes. And, or whatever you feel like you want to try out, just do it. You don't have to be wedded to this exactly. And I thought, well, I don't want to get anybody upset who's a big fan out there, because obviously there's huge fans, especially all through Europe. You wouldn't believe the following in Europe of DuckTales, but also Carl Barks' work.
Isn't
So
Donald Duck huge in Europe?
Pardon?
Isn't Donald Duck huge in Europe?
Oh, he's huge, and so is Uncle Scrooge. Or Scrooge McDuck is gigantic over there. They've got museums dedicated to some of this stuff.
Wow.
But I went ahead and I started working on it, and I looked at the mansion, and the mansion that Carl had done was more kind of a southern mansion in a way. It was more rectangular, simple with columns. I thought, gee, he's Scottish. It's Scrooge McDuck, lad. And I thought, well, what if I put him up in the hills and give him kind of a Scottish manor home type of thing? So I went ahead and I went crazy with the dollar motifs. I figured, if I'm going to put a dollar motif everywhere I can think of. So I mean, they have a swimming pool in the back, and it's a dollar sign swimming pool.
Right.
I've got the fountain in the front with a dollar sign. I put a cornucopia. I have gigantic circular parts of the architecture, but even like the weather vane was a dollar sign up there, and there's bags of money there. I had instead of showing little arrows, I had a pick and a pickaxe from his the areas we went through. In fact, one of his earliest adventures where he met Goldie in the Klondike. So I try to base things all based on the books, but it was taking a unique twist. And so years later, when I was working on the Ducktales and I did all these different mansion designs and designs of Duckburg, I went ahead and I showed a couple of sketches because Jack had told me that Carl was going to be joining us, and so I showed him the sketches. And I thought, oh boy, he was a gentleman, and I thought, well, he's just saying he likes it, but he said, you know what? And this was I think the most I don't know, the closest, the best compliment I ever had in my life, because it means so much. He said, I wish I had thought of that. And I never forgot that.
Whoa.
Like Carl looked at it and said, at that point, I had already looked at all his comics, and I had this huge admiration, and I was not afraid, but I just was so intimidated by what all this person had done, what he created. And I felt like this might be something where I'm asking for trouble if I show him something where I've just done something different. But he liked it. And over the years, a lot of those designs I did for DuckTales have become part of the canon now, because I see it even on some of the new versions coming over from Italy or something from France in the comics. I think IDW or puts them out, and you'll see the new versions like, wow, they've looked at this stuff. They actually are using our designs.
That's awesome. That's really cool. Oh, I love hearing this stuff. Okay, now I want to talk about the terror that flaps in the night over here. Let's talk about some Darkwing.
Dark.
But I could hear you talk about DuckTales all day. Honestly, I love hearing about the development of the show. But Darkwing Duck. Now we know Darkwing went through one hell of an evolution.
Just whistling Dixie, Buster.
Yeah. So Double O Duck, tell us a bit about the development of Darkwing Duck from the beginning. Basically, we all know it wasn't Darkwing Duck when it started.
Right.
So,
well, when I got on it, I was actually I'd go back and forth. I was kind of ping-ponging back and forth between TV and features. I'd work on features, do some concept work, and I'd go back and forth. So I just got finished doing my ping-ponging. I was working on Roger Rabbit in the morning at one point, and I was doing, DuckTales was in the afternoon. And I was paid in the morning I was paid by an Amblin employee from 12 to, or from 8 o'clock to 12. From 1 to 5, I was a Disney TV employee. Then at night, I was paid to do concept work for features. But then he said, we want to do something. We need some North shows. We need more, some new shows we're going to put into the lineup. So Darkwing Duck, or Double O Duck, came because we had a failed show called Bullwinkle. And now, my wife and I, we had little annual passes because the Universal Studios is really about, 15 minutes from the house down the way, down to Universal Studios. And so we'd go there, and I remember they said, well, we're going to do this show called, it's going to be Bullwinkle. We're bringing it all back. I'm thinking, did Jay Ward say it's okay? Oh, we don't, it's okay. We have permission. We have the whole thing. Are you sure Jay Ward said it was okay? I'm thinking, because Jay was still around, and I didn't think he was a big fan of Disney offhand from what I'd heard. So next thing you know, I'm working on this thing like crazy. I developed all these things where it was like, I had fractured scary tales because we were, at that time, Friday the 13th was really big, and Jason and all that. So I had all these gag things done. I'd worked on it for like a solid week because we needed to get a certain number of series slotted in there to keep our brand new Disney afternoon going. So they wanted new series, and so I had this whole thing ready to pitch. And then I remember I'd asked them, I said, "Do we have the rights to it?" And I was told, "Well, we have the video rights." I'm thinking, video rights? Well, they must know because these guys it's management, so they know all these things. Well, a couple of days before we're going to pitch it, I get this screaming call like, "Oh my God, we don't have the rights! We don't have the rights!" And stop it! Put your pencils down. And so we only had the rights just to distribute, the video, the shows they already done. We couldn't do any new ones. So Double O Duck was hurried through pretty quick. And Double O Duck was based on a character from DuckTales.
Right.
And so then what happened was when we were doing it, I started doing some real early sketches. Now another person who's Bob Klein and Tad Stone's already working on it.
Yep.
They were doing some sketches on the thing already. And Gary Kreisel, who was in charge of, he did Disney Channel and also Disney Afternoon, wasn't real happy the way it was going. And they were using pretty much the Double O Duck type design somewhat from the show. and Double Duck had a really round head, and his costume, I called it ice cream. It was the ice cream man. It was, I mean, it was all white. I'm thinking like, wait a minute, if this guy's like the superhero, it'd be kind of neat if I was thinking more like the Batman stuff and all. And Tad liked some of the ideas, things I was kicking around because he likes things. We were kicking around. We talked about the Shadow, Batman, all this kind of stuff. And so we turned it around, and I started doing sketches where I ignored the white cape, and I started making it more just closer to like Batman. We elongated. His hat was really almost like a pork pie hat that Buster Keaton would have wore. So I elongated it, made it more as based on the Shadow. And then his face, it really was a rip-off, to be honest, I got to say. It was Daffy Duck. And so when we were doing the pitch and all that, we were kind of really leaning heavy on Daffy Duck for the basic thrust to it. But also Roger Rabbit had come out around that time, and we added cheeks. Basically, if you take Daffy Duck and you
Roger Rabbit cheeks,
you put Roger Rabbit cheeks on there, you got what you ended up doing. Because you want to try to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You try to make something unique. You want to see what's been done and make sure yours is a little bit different. And so we did that, and I did a bunch of sketches. It was crazy because that's what usually happens, I think, at Disney TV in those days anyway. We would need something really quick. Where nowadays, sometimes they'll still work on a TV series for sometimes months, almost up to a year to get it all ready. Well, that thing was done under a week. And in fact, the final sketches I did, all the production, the pitch sketches, those were done over a weekend. I did all these pastels. Actually, I had to work really quick in pastel. And I do watercolor touch-ups. So all the final things, I did these things where I put them up on top of a bridge, which was something I thought might be kind of fun. I showed it to Tad. He goes, "Oh, that's kind of neat." When Jeffrey Katzenberg saw it, he goes, "It reminds me of Basil." And I was like, "Well, what the heck? I worked on Basil. I designed a lot of things we did in Big Ben, so I can see why it might look like that." But I had him riding a motorcycle up the cable, which was something you could only do pretty much in animation. You wouldn't want to try that. Kids don't try that at home. And so they thought that was kind of neat. And that became something we used in the series. And also giving a motorcycle was something we ended up using. We made it the rat catcher. So it kind of grew bit by bit from that.
Some of the earliest of your art I ever remember seeing were those Darkwing sketches of the rat catcher on the bridge and him on top of the bridge and the Double O Duck stuff. Yeah, definitely some of your earliest art, definitely for me, was the Darkwing stuff.
We got a from MGM too, because what happened was they would sit there and take these and go to New York for I'm trying to think what they called these things. It would be like a kind of a show and tell. We get the affiliates together from around the globe, especially in America, and you'd meet them there. It's okay. This is what Disney's going to be showing, what Warner's is showing. This is what Columbia or Sony or everybody else. This is all the new shows we have. So you'd sit there and set up your affiliates and make sure you've got enough people that are buying your show. And what they did was they took the first elements I'd say right about the time I was getting onto the show. They took all those. So those were the ones that were from Double O Duck, and they called it Double O Duck. And it's like there's a new hero in town or something. And it's a pop-up. If I've still got it, he's wearing the ice cream outfit, all white, and it's the wrong character. But what happened was that went over to our good friends over at MGM, and they saw Double O Duck, huh? Well, now we're going to send you guys a cease and desist because we've got a Double O famous character already, and we don't want you guys to kind of horn in on that. So we'd like you to change it. So we were advised that we should change the name, and so we had a contest in the studio, and we must have had probably about maybe 150 or whatever, a ton of names that some I won't repeat, but we had some interesting names, and of course Darkwing Duck ended up being the winner. Right. It was a trip to Hawaii. No. I think it was a trip to Chili John's over in Burbank.
Mike, do you still have any of the Double O Duck prints, the original ones?
I'm trying to think. I've got scans of all this stuff and photographs. I think all the originals. The weird thing is, a lot of this stuff I always turn it into the Disney archives. And so back at that time we had the Disney TV archives, which is like a smaller version. And so what I've discovered since then, they've been interviewing me for a couple of books about the Disney Afternoon that are coming out pretty soon. And when I showed, one of the guys came over for an interview at the house, and I showed him some Xeroxes and some scans I had, and he goes, "Oh my God, this is better than what they have over down in the archives." I said, "You're kidding," because the archives should have all the originals. He goes, "Well, they don't have this." So it's weird. I don't know what happened. I mean, I took photographs of a lot of things that I would work on. I took Xeroxes, and just for a keepsake, just a little memory of something that you did. And then I guess some of the stuff, for whatever reason, they just didn't get put into the right files. Or in some cases, I know, like with the comic books I would work on, right around through I think it was the all the 70s and maybe the 80s, I did a lot of original artwork for uh, Uncle Scrooge comics and Donald Duck and stuff. And that
Hmm.
stuff, I understand, was all thrown out. I
Oh,
I
did
got
like watercolors. I had real tight watercolors and stuff for like special Christmas issues and Thanksgiving and stuff like that. And it would be like multi-pages, a real detailed, kind of the old-fashioned 30s kind of approach. And then I turned the stuff in and they printed it and it became very popular. And I was talking to one of the editors and he goes, "Oh yeah." It says it's one of the things I just can't get over. They threw all that stuff out. They said at one point, we got to, we shut down the comic division in our own company,
hmm
and they just didn't want to really deal with trying to put the stuff away somewhere careful, so they just tossed it. So yeah, I've got scans of stuff, but I'm not sure where all the original stuff is. It could be in a
yeah.
land.
yeah.
I gotta get some scans autographed by you because we mentioned this in our very first episode of our podcast that I mentioned it. I love the double O duck look. Of course, I don't
Oh,
love it as
great.
much as the Darkwing one, but I love it. It's amazing to me.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
So, anything else Darkwing related that we could talk about? How involved were you once the series actually got rolling, when it went into production?
Actually, once it started going on there, what I would do is I'd do a lot of the concept work. So I work on shows in the very beginning, and then once that stuff goes to the end, or once it starts going production, I'll end up doing maybe working on the title sequence or something, or working on a teaser to get out there to the public. And then I'm already working on another show by the time that one, before it even hits the air.
So
I might have
good.
been working on Goof Troop or something
Yeah,
at that point.
good segue, Mike. I read your posts about Goof Troop on your blog a few years ago, but I bet a lot of our listeners don't know this. Why was Goof Troop called Goof Troop?
Your
What was
guess
the?
is as good as mine. No.
Oh,
What happened was Goofy was going to be a scout leader. He was going to sit there and take all these little kids around in a scout troop. And it wasn't really a well thought out premise for a show. And I went through about a dozen different versions using that kind of premise. And we had maybe about 2 weeks to put together a show to show Jeffrey and Michael and the guys. And so I kept sitting there working on different versions. We'd make them all different creatures. It might be like a gigantic rats, maybe a rabbit, different. Oh, let's make them all dogs this week. This week, let's make them lizards. Let's add a gorilla. It wasn't really thought out as far as a story or dynamics of how it would even look. And so finally, the last day, I got a call from Gary, again, Gary Kreisel, who's in charge, and he says, "So Mike, we're all ready for the pitch next week." I said, "You haven't got a show." And he goes, "What?" I said, "You haven't." And I told him what happened is that the last premise was, we'll put them all into Toontown, and Goofy will be he'll be a scout leader. He works in Toontown, and it's like, if you put Goofy in a world where everything is goofy, he's no longer Goofy. It's like when you have Pluto, and he takes kind of relieves himself on a fire hydrant in Toontown. The fire hydrant's going to chase him and hose him down for a little revenge. So that's a crazy world. And Goofy's only strange if he's in a world like a little bit like ours, and how he handles driving, how he handles swimming, how to ride a horse, how to play baseball, whatever. But if you put him into a place where everything is crazy, he's not quite as goofy as he should be.
Hmm.
And so I said, what? And so I remember Gary said, well, what would you do? And I said, well, what if we just basically make them, it's a father and son sitcom. And I said, it's a single parent trying to raise a kid. And there's a lot of people that are dealing with that right now. And I said, and also, imagine you're, let's say, a preteen. You're dealing with all the usual stuff. You got, how you going to find a date for Friday night, or are you going to pass that next test in algebra or whatever? All these things are going on. Am I going to be picked for the baseball team? Or am I going to be the last one and just left out and be the manager or whatever? And I said, he's dealing with all these things the kids deal with. On top of that, his father's Goofy. And I mean literally Goofy. And so he says, that sounds fantastic. Let's do it. So then I worked, and again, one of the things where I worked on, it was mainly over a weekend, getting all the stuff ready for that Monday pitch. It was insane. So I did. He said, how would you do the pitch? And I said, well, I was thinking a day in the life of Goofy, from the time he gets up in the morning to the time he goes to bed. But said through all of the stuff, no matter what, both Goofy and his son realize that there is a bond, there's a love between them that can never be replaced.
Hmm.
And so I tried to, that's something that, I don't know, Walt Disney, believe it or not, wasn't really a huge fan of Goofy.
No, I
And
heard
Walt,
that.
and so, you heard that?
I've heard that. Yeah, I heard he didn't like
Yeah.
Goofy very much.
Well, the reason was from I looked at the interviews and all, and talking to some of the guys that were. Because I talked to Kenny and Jack Hanna, and they both directed some of the Goofy shorts. They would hear some things from Walt. Walt more than once complained that they were treating Goofy as a prop. And what set Walt's animation apart from all the other animation was his had personality. And so he didn't. I mean, I liked some of the quote unquote prop shorts, like Hockey Homicide is
Oh, I
hilarious.
love that cartoon.
That's my favorite. That's fantastic. But apparently Walt, he wanted more and more personality. He was afraid that it was getting closer to like Warner Brothers or just something like that. He wanted to have have personality you can feel to it. So I made sure that I had a thing where part of the pitch I had was at the very last sketch I had was Goofy going over to the pitching mound. His son Max is out there, and you can see up on the scoreboard it says like 99 to nothing or something. And his son's, real dejected. The crowds are gone. The sun's setting. You see tumbleweeds rolling across the baseball field. But he puts his arms around Max and he goes, "Well, that's okay, Max. I still love you." And so I want to make sure you get things like that no matter what happened, it shows there's a real love between these guys.
That's wonderful, Mike.
Mike, I wanted to ask you something really quick about Darkwing. One thing that made the show really strong was the villains. Did you have like a favorite villain that you like doing the concept for animation for? Was there like a certain villain that stood out to you?
We were looking at things like from James Bond and stuff because I had some stuff in the shadow, but I'd say one of my favorites is probably just Steelbeak.
Nice.
Okay.
It depends. There's so many things because at that point, I only did a couple of different villains. I had some, I can't remember the right names. I don't want to say some kind of slur or something and get in trouble for it, but we had so many different villains that we tried to stick a few of those into the pitch. And then I went on my merry way at that point.
Okay.
So fast forwarding quite a bit, you got to work with Ducktales and Darkwing again recently on the new Ducktales show.
Boy, that was fun. That was incredible. They gave me a call, invited me to come over early on before Ducktales had aired, and I said, "Well, we're working on this," and they treated me like just so here you're the returning hero or something, and it was just fantastic. The people I met there, from Frank to Matt, Sean was the art director. Frank and Matt were the producers and co-creators of the new version, and Susanna Olsen. They were just the whole crew was just fantastic, and they would show me what they were working on, and it threw me a little bit when I saw the characters. I said, "Well, and one of the character designers, one of the lead ones, said, "Well, we're trying to do something different because in the past they've always based so many things on circles. We thought we'd do something and make it a little more edgy, no pun intended." And so it was really more cube faces. And I said, "Well, just make sure when you get to you start making some merchandise, watch out the kids don't hug those guys because they'll poke their eye out." But they did. And the funny thing is, I think that had a little bit of an effect because they softened the edges a little bit by the time it went to through production. And it was a blast because I loved it. They gave me a call and said, could you? And they said, "Well, could you work on a couple of things for us?" I said, "Well, yeah. Do you want me to? I can draw it in your new style if you'd like." And he goes, "Oh, no. We want you to do your style." So I would do things that would be like a hybrid, a little bit of both. I try to do a little bit more closer to what they were doing, but they wanted me to kind of put my own touch into it. It's like, okay, it might look a little unusual, but like for the Christmas credits for the that episode, the Christmas episode with Scrooge was a blast to work on. It was fantastic. Again, Sean Jimenez was the art director. Sean couldn't have been any better to work with. The guy was fantastic. So worked with all of them. It was just that crew was like going back in time and working with the original DuckTales crew. It was just a lot of people getting together, very excited, and just wonderful to be around.
I think it was so amazing when that Christmas episode aired. Those credits, they let you do them exactly how you did for Mickey's Christmas Carol.
That was a blast because that's one of the things I worked on a few different episodes, and one of them said, "Well, we want to do something kind of a homage to Mickey's Christmas Carol." And so I said, "Oh, really?" So I went in and talked to them, and I took in, again, I had scans and stuff, and I had one of the background plates, how I did the original titles. And so the original titles, when I did them for Christmas Carol, I would take a piece of animation paper and rub some pastels and a little bit of what I call Disney dirt. And we had linoleum floors back in the old studio in those days. So I would sit there and take my foot, put on top of the paper, and just rub it down into the dirt and crumple it up and really just mistreat the animation paper in the worst way. And then I would sit there and add a little bit of watercolor to it, and it was all done like in umbers and some different oranges and things like that, and burnt sienna. So I had something that looked almost like a parchment paper. Then I would sit there and I'd sketch the characters like Jiminy Cricket or Mickey or whatever, and then I took it over to Xerox, and I said, "Can you Xerox this in a brown line?" And I'd put it over that background. So the background plate we used was the original background plate from Mickey's Christmas Carol. So it's kind of a little nod to the old film. And it was a blast working on those characters.
That was fantastic. And the Darkwing comic art in the Duck Knight Returns episode, I was not prepared for that.
Yeah, seeing his name pop up like that, I was like, "Whoa!"
Yeah, you actually got your name right there.
Said, I would not sign my name to something like that because it seems kind of strange to put it on a show. But Matt was we had a story meeting talking about it, and Matt goes, "Well, go ahead, put your name on it." And everybody said, "Yeah, put your name." But that's I figured, well, I'll put my name on it, but they'll definitely take it off by the time it hits the airwaves. And so I didn't see it the first time it actually hit or the day it hit, because some people would sit there and look at it like, I don't know, like early previews or whatever it was. And I started getting all these emails, and people on Facebook were writing all these things. Went, "Mike, we saw what you worked on." I went, "How could you have seen it?" And I saw it and it had my signature still there. And I went, "Oh my gosh, boy,
That was so
head
cool.
roll for this."
That was truly amazing.
I love working on the new characters like that. And I did it in the old style, which is kind of funky and neat. So that was a lot of fun.
Are you still involved at all, or?
I do some things. I just can't really say much about it because until they actually hit the airwaves.
Fair enough. That's encouraging enough to hear. That's awesome, Mike. And so basically, to start wrapping up, what would you say out of all the things you worked on all these years, is there something you're like particularly the most proud of, or like what has been your favorite thing to have worked on?
Well, Mermaid was a blast because Mermaid has a lot of fans. My daughter was actually my first daughter was born during development. She was born with flaming red hair. She was actually the real reason that Ariel's got red hair. And that was a lot of fun to work on that with Howard Ashman because he was a great songwriter. But I'd say maybe I worked with Jim Henson and Frank Oz on the Muppet movie. That was a blast.
Oh, you lucky man.
So I'd say that was something really special because me having lunchtime with those guys, privately was just hilarious. It was a lot of fun.
Really quick, since I didn't know you worked on the Muppet movie. What did you do for that movie?
My wife and I we worked on it. We were we were Emmett and Ma Otter. My wife was Ma Otter. I was Emmett. Typecast. What can I say? But of course she's out of reach. She can't punch me right now. I'll get a punch later, probably when she hears this. But it was a blast. The first day we were there, we took all these lessons from Frank or actually from Jim. And Jim said, "Look, when I tell you, put your hands up and Muppets up, and you do your routine." We were all wearing black, and we had little TVs in front of us, and it was pre-recorded soundtrack. And we'd sit there and just kind of mouth and do all the acting to it. He said, "I want to say, Muppets up, you get ready, we'll see, roll them, action, and all that. When I say Muppets down, rest your arms." I said, "I know these guys don't weigh much. They're just foam rubber. But believe me, by the end of the day, if you don't rest your arms." And it was funny because there was a couple other people that just started the same day. And they didn't rest their arms. And boy, it was like they were made of jelly by 5 o'clock.
So, yeah, I'm a gigantic Muppet fan. Huge. Were you one of the many people that had performed Muppets for that final musical number at the end?
We did that. We did a couple scenes, but that was one of the things we did. That was one of the reasons we were actually hired. And then what happened was afterwards, Jim came over and was talking to my wife and I both. He says, "Look, are you guys, what are you guys doing?" I said, "Well, we're studying over at CalArts and all this." He says, "Well, when it's all done," he says, where are you going to go?" I said, "Well, we're hoping, to get over at Disney." He said he told both of us because he says if it doesn't work out, if you don't end up not going there, or if you go there it doesn't quite not the place you wanted or whatever, he says please keep us in mind. He says you got a home with us, and he wrote us the nicest thank you note, a nice handwritten note from Jim Henson, which I got hanging in my studio to this day. It just one of the nicest guys I worked for. But I'd say that was one of the biggest treats I ever worked on.
That's fantastic.
But also one of the films I worked on that never actually got made, I would say would be Little Broomstick. And that was something I worked in with some of the 9 Old Men, like Wooly Riderman and all. Mm-hmm. And that was, see if it sounds familiar to you. This was back around 78. It was a little girl who's ends up being taken out. Her parents are not having the greatest time. They're getting divorced, but she's ends up going out to the country to live with her aunt, and she's not treated that well. She's not banned under a staircase, but she's put in a little storeroom where she kind of hangs out. She finds a little broom. Anyway, through some magical things that happen with a certain flower that blooms once every few hundred years, she's transported to this wizard and witchcraft school.
Huh. Boy, does that sound familiar.
And so it was a fantastic, but the thing is, it was loaded with so much flying and all the crowds. We had crowds and crowd scenes in there. So, well, it got to the point where we were developing that and developing Black Cauldron. And I was a huge Black Cauldron fan, but then they said, well, we can only do one film. And so it's which you want to work on, or which you think would be the best film. And it's funny because some of the old guys, the old guard, thought it should be Little Broomstick. And I actually jumped teams from Black Cauldron to Little Broomstick, saying, I agree. I think it is a better story. And we went with Black Cauldron instead.
Boy, do I wonder what would have happened if you had made Little Broomstick insteed. Would there be a Harry Potter right now? It sounds very scary familiar.
It was based on a book. I'm trying to think of the author's name, but it was really a beautiful little story. It was frightening because it was like these kids disappear from across part of the country, and people are looking for them. They're missing their kids, and they're all transmogrified or something into these animals at this witchcraft school. And so at the very end, this finale is to help all these kids that have been missing for, in some cases, I don't know, it was like 10 or 20 years from their parents, and to get them back home. And it was almost, when you saw the stuff we did, I think people were almost crying. It was so powerful, and it was just heroic, and it had a lot of laughs in it too. But it was so detailed, so complicated. You almost needed to do it back in the 30s or something.
They probably could easily do it now too, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, now we could do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Mike, you mentioned your wife twice on here, and I'm on IMDb right now, and I have to let you plug her. Her resume is just amazing. I'm looking at it right now. Can you plug like some of her work she's done?
Well, I'll tell you, Patty was. I met her over at CalArts, and the first day we were in line to the bookstore, and she tapped me on my shoulder and she says, "Excuse me, good looking." And I said, "Someday I want to marry." And actually, I'm saying because she's down the way, she can hear what I'm saying, so I'm just having some fun with her. But anyway, no, she was the first. We didn't have that many girls in the animation program at Disney, and out of that, we only had I think it was like maybe 3 or something to begin with out of the whole program. But she was the first female hired from CalArts Disney program by the studio, and she became the first female effects animator in the history of Disney Studios. So I'm very, very proud of her. She would do scenes that people would, at that time, she was low person on the totem pole. And you might be handed scenes where maybe somebody would be on the stack to pick up, might be one leaf fluttering down from a tree leaf or from a tree branch. And there'd be another scene where it might be about 30 leaves fluttering through with branches breaking. And so she would be low person, so she'd be handed the one with all the leaves and the branches breaking. So she started getting all these scenes, earthquakes and volcanoes and stuff that were detailed, and they were really would hurt your footage. And footage was a quota we kind of had, although Disney was always about quality. It's like, do the best you can, try to hit the quota, but let's make sure it's Disney quality. So she ended up working on this stuff. At one point, she was doing some stuff for, of course, for Cauldron, for Fox and the Hound and all. But she did a thing for Meet the World, and it was like the birth or the creation of Japan. It had all these waves crashing, and it had volcanoes erupting, earthquakes, all this stuff. And I remember she'd been told they were going to screen it up in the sweatbox. It was Walt's old sweatbox up on the 3rd floor. Mm-hmm. So she goes up there, and there was 2 figures. She opened the door, and you kind of see a little bit of light kind of creep in. There's only 2 figures sitting in the entire little auditorium there, and one was Ron Miller, who was the head of the studio, and the other person was Dave Michener, who was the head of all the effects that were being done for Epcot and all the different parks and stuff. And it was her immediate boss. So he started running this, and he goes, "Wait, did Josh Metter do this? Did we rehire Josh?" And Josh is one of the great effects animators. He did things even for outside studios like the creature from the Id, from Forbidden Planet. That weird-looking kind of electric creature that erupts and attacks the spacemen. Mm-hmm. He worked on things like that. He just did so much stuff. He was amazing. So it was a compliment to be compared to that. But he says, "Is this Josh?" And he goes, "No, it's Patty Peraza." And he said, "Well, is she an animator?" And he goes, "No, she's not." And she says, "Well, she is now." So she got promotion. at that time when she was promoted animator, she was the only organization.
Mm.
So yeah, I'm very, very proud of her.
Now, Mike,
hopefully that'll give me maybe a bowl of gumbo in the next couple of days.
Hey, happy wife, happy life.
You bet.
Now, Mike, I know right now with the corona and stuff, with the way the world is, but once this all passes through, can our listeners, our Darkwing fans, can they find you at conventions and stuff? Do you have any like already scheduled, or do you guys plan on touring out there or anything?
We had a few. We had something that was going to happen down in Florida. We also had one in South Carolina, and those were canceled. We have something I think coming up in July.
Oh man,
Georgia.
I'm in Georgia. I'm like right between those two states, Florida and South Carolina.
Well, we have Chicago in August, and we have a few other ones. But yeah, well, if you want to send me a name of a convention, send a convention. We'll contact them and see if they're interested.
Okay, yeah, because we would love to promote you out there and share with our listeners, because the animators, like you said, they don't get as much love, man, and they should.
I was kidding about that, about the voices, because actually a lot of the voices, like Jim and all, are good friends. But it's funny because a lot of conventions do seem to kind of cater more towards that, and we've done a few conventions where we actually put them together with voices and artists and things, and it's made it even more fun, I think. And so we've been very, very lucky. We've been treated very well at all your convention we've been to, so we've enjoyed it.
That's terrific.
Mm-hmm. All right, so thanks for being on here, Mike, man. We really appreciate you being on here with this interview, man. We learned a lot, man. It was very educational.
Yes, thank you so much, Mike.
Well, thank you, guys. You guys take care. Keep in touch.
You too. Stay dangerous.
Let's all get dangerous together, fellas. See y'all later.
Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.